you mentioned in the press conference that Bob Shrum's book wasn't necessarily the most accurate thing.
No,
But
that's
there
an
was
understatement.
there was a portion about you were against the Iraq War. And
Yeah, but he had it wrong about that. First of all, he was, this is, I think, hindsight by him. He was at no meeting at which I expressed my opinion. The meeting that he was referring to in that book never occurred. I mean, there was a meeting with John's foreign policy advisors and with people from the Clinton administration, but Bob Shrum was not there. I know the people who were there, and I'm not, they can say who they were, but it was a group of 5 of us. John was there, I was there. John's chief of staff, who had previously been on the National Security Council, someone else who was on the National Security Council, a deputy secretary of state in the Clinton administration. That's who was at the table. That's it. And at that meeting, and only that meeting, did I say, where's the provocation? I did not use the whatever basis. I can't remember what it is because it wasn't mine. It was whatever he had dreamed up, whatever Shrum had dreamed up. The meeting he's talking about was a meeting on education, at which there were no foreign policy people because you don't bring them to an education meeting. And Shrum and an economist who was at that meeting got into an argument about Iraq. John wasn't involved in the argument. I wasn't. They were involved in the argument. I think that Bob Shrum knew later that I had said that I had opposed it, though he didn't know why, clearly, because he wasn't there. And so that's how that conversation took place. I tell you, one of the things I'm truly aggravated about in that book is the suggestion that John in any way used our son's death to cozy up to anyone. I cannot tell you, there are not words for how irritated that makes me. If you want to know about our interactions with Bob Shrum, read my book, not his. And I can tell you, I really do have an extraordinary memory. I can tell you where people sat in meetings. I can tell you exactly the words they used. And I out Shrum a little in that book. I'm actually reasonably nice, and I even say I'm being pretty nice, all things considered.
So why did John vote for the war in 2002?
That was his judgment at the time, which he said was a misjudgment, and he takes responsibility for it. He voted for it because he was hearing one thing from George Tenet, who was appointed by Clinton. So this wasn't a Bush guy, and even though he thought that they were using inflammatory language, Tenet was telling him the same thing. And then he sits down with these people from the National Security Council and the State Department under Clinton, and he's hearing exactly the same thing. Now, they're all getting the worst information, and I think that the administration may have helped clean up that information as it was coming to the Intelligence Committee. But whatever, it wasn't like he was hearing something different that allowed him to think he had some leeway in this. I mean, he was hearing this was an emergency. And it's hard to think back at the time. At the time, the Iraq War resolution did authorize the use of force, but the president was going in anyway. I mean, if you look back in time, he was going in. This was supposed to sew him up and send him to the UN, and so I'm not going to make apologies for him when he's not making apologies for himself. But that was his best judgment at the time, and other people had different judgment. It was much easier to have a different judgment if you didn't talk to all these people.
Sure.
So
But if the resolution said going back to the UN, I was at the California Democratic Convention in 2003.
He said extremely painful for John.
The weekend before Bush went off to war, and I believe at that point it was when the UN Security Council had already pretty much made it clear, France had made it clear,
right,
we're not going to support this war. Yet John came to the convention and spoke about supporting the war.
Yeah.
I mean, I was one of the people who booed him.
Yeah, right. And Howard got up and said that nobody's fessing up about this stuff. And then Howard wrote John a very nice letter apologizing, saying that John had been up front and said, at least was willing to say that's where he was, because he's a pretty straightforward guy. He was wrong. I don't know how many different ways you can say it. And, I know as a wife, it's really great to have a husband who can say those words. But it's just, but he was wrong. And and there were people who were right, who were, some of whom were looking at the same things, but some of whom had more. There's Patrick Moynihan a long time ago, and John served a very short period of time with Patrick Moynihan in the Senate. But Moynihan wrote a book a long time ago about the CIA's use of information, and they'll often tell you X and not X, so they cover themselves and everything. And maybe it should have, raised some question to him, because, John had, I think knew about this warning handbook, I don't know if he read it, but he certainly knew about it. He knew that he was only getting X. So where's the not X, Did somebody do something with the not X part of this? So maybe that should have, and maybe that made some people, Bob Graham, for example, more skeptical than it made John. But, whatever the reasons, John was wrong, and he says it, and when he was doing something, he knew when he was coming here. He called me afterwards, I wasn't here, and said, that was one of the most painful experiences I've ever been through. But he didn't back down then of admitting where he was and the same things.
We have time for a couple more questions.
To healthcare, I know you got a question about the single payer in the other room.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
It's socialized medicine.
Right, socialized medicine, right.
A little lack of understanding.
Yeah, indeed. But I know a number of us have gotten a chance to see Sicko in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen it yet?
I guess you get advanced stuff, right?
Yeah, we got in. There was a
You
screening.
can find it
here.
on the internet.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
It's
what
on
my
the
brother
internet?
was watching it on the train. But
Yeah, unfortunately, my connection, wireless connection is so slow, it's like each screen does this. It is just painful to watch video, but yeah.
So